Canada looks like one of the most peaceful and predictable countries on Earth. It has maple syrup, hockey, beautiful mountains, and people who supposedly apologize when someone else bumps into them. But look beneath the surface, and Canada starts making absolutely no sense. This is a country with highways that melt every spring, a settlement where the sun disappears for months, and a coastline so long that you could circle the entire planet several times and still not cover it all. Some Canadians live only minutes from the United States. Others live in communities so isolated that groceries, construction, equipment, and even vehicles must arrive by airplane or wait until the lakes freeze solid enough to become roads. And later, we'll visit a Canadian town that has something most places would never need: a jail built for polar bears. These are 13 Canada facts that sound completely fake, but are true. Let's begin. Canada is the second largest country in the world, so you might expect it to have a fairly long coastline, but fairly long doesn't even begin to describe it. Canada's coastline stretches for more than 243,000 kilometers, touching the Atlantic, Pacific, and Arctic Oceans. That makes it the longest coastline of any country on Earth. To understand how ridiculous that is, the circumference of Earth is roughly 40,000 kilometers. That means Canada's coastline is long enough to wrap around the entire planet approximately 6 times. And it isn't just one smooth line. Canada is surrounded by countless bays, peninsulas, inlets, and islands. Every twist in the shoreline adds more distance. The Canadian Arctic archipelago alone contains tens of thousands of islands, creating a frozen maze of coastlines that few human beings will ever see. In fact, visiting every section would be almost impossible. Some stretches are separated from the nearest road by hundreds of kilometers of wilderness. Others remain locked in sea ice for much of the year. Canada doesn't simply have a coastline, it has enough coastline for several countries, but despite owning more shoreline than anywhere else on Earth, most Canadians live nowhere near the northern part of it. And that brings us to something even stranger. Look at Canada on a map and it appears enormous. It stretches from the United States almost all the way to the North Pole. But Canada's population is not spread evenly across that land, not even close. According to Statistics Canada, about 2 out of every 3 Canadians live within 100 kilometers of the southern Canada-United States border, an area representing only around 4% of the country's territory. Imagine owning an enormous mansion, but choosing to squeeze almost everyone into a few rooms near the front door. That is basically Canada. Cities like Vancouver, Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal sit relatively close to the American border. Move farther north, and the cities disappear. Highways become less common. Communities grow smaller. Eventually, you can travel across enormous regions containing forests, lakes, and tundra with very few permanent residents. Almost 3/4 of Canadians were living in major urban centers by the 2021 census, while less than 1 in 5 lived in rural areas. So Canada is one of the largest countries in the world, but much of its population lives along a narrow southern ribbon. Beyond that ribbon is a different Canada, one where distance controls almost everything. And sometimes, the only way to overcome that distance is to build a highway on top of a lake. In most countries, building a road means laying asphalt over solid ground. In northern Canada, the ground is sometimes optional. Every winter, thousands of kilometers of seasonal roads are constructed across frozen terrain, rivers, and lakes. They are known as winter roads, or ice roads. Canada has approximately 8,000 kilometers of official winter roads, although the size of the network changes from season to season. Once the ice becomes thick enough, workers clear snow, mark safe routes, and test whether the surface can support heavy vehicles. Then the trucks arrive. They transport fuel, food, building materials, vehicles, and essential supplies to isolated northern communities. For some remote First Nations, these roads are a vital connection to the rest of the country and may remain open for only about 3 months each year. Then spring arrives, the ice weakens, the highway closes, and eventually the road disappears back into the lake. That means entire communities have a limited window to receive large or heavy supplies that would be extremely expensive to deliver by air. miss that window, and they may have to wait until the following winter. But rising temperatures are making the season less predictable. Shorter periods of deep cold can reduce the time available to safely operate these roads. Canada has highways that must be rebuilt every year, only to melt a few months later, and somehow that still isn't the most extreme example of Canadian isolation, because farther north is a place where darkness lasts for months, supplies arrive through enormous military airlifts, and the North Pole is closer than the nearest major city. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing you're closer to the North Pole than you are to almost every major city on Earth. Welcome to Alert, Nunavut. Sitting at roughly 82 degrees north latitude, Alert is the northernmost permanently inhabited settlement on the planet. It's just over 800 kilometers from the North Pole, making it one of the most isolated places where people live year-round. There are no shopping malls, no movie theaters, no highways leading in or out. In fact, there are no public roads connecting Alert to the rest of Canada. Everything, from groceries and fuel to construction materials, arrives by military aircraft during carefully planned supply flights. Most of the people stationed here are members of the Canadian Armed Forces or scientific researchers studying everything from climate change to the Earth's atmosphere. Life in Alert isn't just isolated, it's extreme. During the summer, the sun refuses to set for months. Then winter arrives, and darkness takes over. For nearly 4 months, the sun never rises above the horizon. Imagine living your everyday life under a sky that never gets brighter than twilight. Most people will never experience anything remotely like it. Yet for the small community in Alert, it's simply another winter. But if Canada's northern settlements seem unbelievable, wait until you hear how much fresh water the country actually holds, because the numbers are almost impossible to believe. Ask someone how many lakes they think Canada has. 10,000, 100,000, maybe 500,000? The real answer is so outrageous that many people assume it's a myth. Canada is home to well over 2 million lakes. That's more lakes than every other country on Earth combined. In fact, nearly 2/3 of the world's lakes are found in Canada. Why? The answer goes back over 10,000 years. During the last ice age, enormous glaciers, some over 3 kilometers thick, covered much of the country. As they slowly retreated, they carved millions of depressions into the landscape. Those depressions eventually filled with water, creating an almost endless network of lakes stretching from coast to coast. Some are so massive they behave like inland seas. Lake Superior, shared with the United States, contains enough fresh water to cover North and South America under nearly a foot of water. Others are so remote, they've never even been officially named. From space, Canada almost looks blue. The country's lakes dominate its landscape so completely that pilots flying across northern Canada often joke there's more water than land. Which raises another question. If Canada has this much fresh water, what could possibly become more valuable than that? The answer might surprise you. Maple syrup is practically synonymous with Canada, but very few people realize one Canadian province quietly dominates the entire industry. Quebec produces around 70% of the world's maple syrup. That's not a typo. Nearly 3 out of every 4 bottles sold anywhere on Earth likely began in the forests of Quebec. Every spring, as temperatures rise above freezing during the day and drop below it at night, maple trees naturally push sap upward through their trunks. Farmers tap into that flow, collecting thousands upon thousands of liters of sap. But here's the crazy part. It takes about 40 liters of maple sap to produce just 1 liter of pure maple syrup. That's why authentic maple syrup is so valuable. And because the industry is so important, Quebec maintains something few people expect to exist: a strategic maple syrup reserve. Think of it like the world's emergency oil reserve, except it's filled with maple syrup. The reserve helps stabilize prices during poor harvests and ensures global supply when production falls. In 2012, thieves managed to steal thousands of barrels from that reserve in what became known as one of the largest agricultural thefts in history. Millions of dollars worth of maple syrup vanished. Only in Canada could maple syrup become valuable enough to inspire an international crime story. But if you think stolen syrup sounds ridiculous, the next fact sounds even more unbelievable, because there's one Canadian town where the local police don't just deal with people, they deal with polar bears. Imagine calling someone in your own country, only to realize they're 5.5 hours ahead of you. That isn't unusual in Canada. Canada stretches so far from east to west that it officially spans 6 time zones: Pacific, Mountain, Central, Eastern, Atlantic, and Newfoundland time. That last one surprises almost everyone. Unlike most places that shift by exactly 1 hour, Newfoundland runs on a 30-minute offset, making it one of the few places in the world with its own half-hour time zone. Think about that for a second. Someone watching fireworks in Vancouver could still have hours to wait before midnight reaches parts of eastern Canada. Television broadcasts, national sports, flight schedules, business meetings, they all have to account for a country that's literally living in 6 different times at once. And that's only the populated parts. Some remote regions adjust their schedules even further based on local needs. Canada doesn't just cover a lot of land, it covers a huge slice of the Earth's rotation. But despite all that space, there's one town where almost everyone worries about the exact same thing. Not traffic, not crime, polar bears. If someone told you there was a prison built specifically for polar bears, you'd probably assume they were joking. They're not. Welcome to Churchill, Manitoba. Known as the polar bear capital of the world, Churchill sits along the migration route used by hundreds of polar bears every autumn as they wait for Hudson Bay to freeze. Most years, the bears simply pass through, but every so often, one gets curious. A bear wanders into town. Maybe it's searching for food. Maybe it catches the scent of garbage. Maybe it's simply exploring. Whatever the reason, it's dangerous. Instead of immediately killing the animal, wildlife officers attempt to scare it away using sirens, vehicles, and noisemakers. If that doesn't work, the bear is tranquilized and taken to what's officially known as the Polar Bear Holding Facility. Locals jokingly call it Polar Bear Jail. Inside, the bears are temporarily held until conditions are safe enough to release them far away from the town. The goal isn't punishment. It's giving both humans and bears another chance to avoid tragedy. Imagine explaining that to someone who has never heard of Churchill. Sorry, I'm late for work. We had another polar bear arrested. Only in Canada. But somehow, Canada still has one more trick hidden beneath its frozen landscape, and it actually changes the way gravity works. This next fact sounds like science fiction, but it's backed by decades of research. Around Hudson Bay, gravity is ever so slightly weaker than it is in most other parts of the world, which means you technically weigh a tiny bit less there. Before you pack your bags, don't expect miracles. You won't lose 10 pounds overnight. The difference is incredibly small, far too little for you to notice without highly sensitive scientific equipment. So why does it happen? Scientists believe there are 2 main reasons. First, during the last ice age, an enormous ice sheet covered much of Canada. The weight of that ice pressed the Earth's crust downward. Even though the glaciers melted thousands of years ago, the land is still slowly rebounding upward today. Second, deep beneath Hudson Bay, the Earth's mantle has a slightly different distribution of mass than surrounding regions. Together, these effects create one of the weakest gravitational regions on Earth. Scientists first noticed the anomaly through satellite measurements and detailed gravitational surveys. It doesn't change daily life, but it does remind us that the planet beneath our feet is constantly moving, even if we can't see it. Canada isn't just home to strange animals, or disappearing roads, or endless lakes. Even the invisible force holding you to the Earth behaves differently here. And yet, the 2 most unbelievable Canadian facts are still waiting. One involves an ocean that rises higher than a 4-story building. The other explains how one of the largest countries on Earth remains almost completely empty. Imagine parking your boat beside a dock, walking away for lunch, and returning to find it floating nearly 16 meters, or over 50 feet, higher than where you left it. At first glance, it feels impossible. But along the Bay of Fundy, between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, it happens every single day. The bay acts like a giant natural funnel. As the Atlantic Ocean pushes water into its narrowing shape, the water has nowhere to go but up. At just the right rhythm, the bay's natural shape amplifies the tides in a phenomenon known as resonance. The result? Some of the highest tidal ranges anywhere on Earth. Twice a day, an astonishing 160 billion tons of seawater surge in and out of the bay. That's more water than the combined flow of every freshwater river on Earth during the same period. Entire beaches disappear beneath the sea. Fishing boats that rested on the muddy ocean floor only hours earlier suddenly float high above it. Visitors can literally walk on the seabed and later paddle a kayak through the exact same place. It's one of those rare places where nature feels like it's performing a magic trick. But even a coastline that transforms every 6 hours isn't Canada's most unbelievable reality, because the biggest surprise isn't what's happening along the edges of the country, it's what's happening in the middle. Canada isn't just covered in forests, it helps keep the entire planet breathing. The country contains roughly 9% of the world's forests, including one of the largest intact boreal forests on Earth. From above, the trees seem endless. They stretch across thousands of kilometers, crossing provinces and territories without interruption. Some sections are so remote that they have never been permanently settled. Others have remained largely unchanged since long before the first European explorers arrived. These forests are home to wolves, lynx, black bears, grizzly bears, moose, woodland caribou, and countless migratory birds. But their importance goes far beyond wildlife. Canada's forests store enormous amounts of carbon, helping regulate the Earth's climate and acting as one of the planet's great natural carbon reservoirs. Standing in one of these forests can feel almost surreal. Hours can pass without seeing another person. No roads, no buildings, no phone signal, just trees in every direction. Which makes Canada's final 2 facts much easier to understand. Most of us take roads for granted. Need groceries, drive to the store, need a hospital, get in the car. But for dozens of remote communities across northern Canada, life works differently. Many communities have no permanent road connection to the rest of the country. During the warmer months, supplies often arrive by aircraft or seasonal barges. When winter arrives and temperatures stay low enough, frozen lakes and rivers become temporary highways. For a few precious weeks, trucks deliver fuel, food, building materials, heavy equipment, and everything else that would otherwise cost a fortune to fly in. Then spring arrives, the ice melts, and those highways disappear. Imagine planning your entire year around whether a frozen lake will stay frozen long enough for a truck to cross it. For many Canadians, that's simply reality. It reminds us just how enormous and how wild this country truly is. Which brings us to the final fact. Canada covers almost 10 million square kilometers, making it the second largest country on Earth. Yet despite all that land, its population is only around 41 million people. To put that into perspective, California alone has nearly the same number of people. That means vast regions of Canada remain almost untouched. There are valleys where no roads have ever been built, mountain ranges where human footprints are rare, forests stretching farther than the eye or even a plane can see. You can drive for hours without passing another town, fly over thousands of square kilometers of wilderness, or stand beneath a sky so dark that the Milky Way looks close enough to touch. Canada isn't empty because nothing is there. It's empty because nature still owns it, and perhaps that's what makes the country so fascinating. The farther you travel, the more impossible it becomes. At first glance, Canada seems familiar, a peaceful country of friendly people, hockey, and maple syrup. But look a little closer, and you find highways that melt every spring, a prison for polar bears, millions of lakes carved by ancient glaciers, a coastline long enough to circle the Earth 6 times, and a wilderness so vast that even today, much of it remains untouched. That's what makes Canada extraordinary, not because it's loud, but because its most unbelievable stories are hidden in plain sight. If you enjoyed discovering Canada's unbelievable side, let us know which facts surprised you the most. And if there's another country you'd like us to explore next, leave it in the comments. Because around the world, the truth is often far stranger than fiction. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode of Good Facts, Bad Facts.